Hello and welcome. You are listening to Nails and Hammers, a podcast where we talk to people about their journeys and understand how they take decisions and solve different problems. Our guest for today is Sai Krishna, who is the co founder and CEO of Scapic. We talk with Sai about his education, his entrepreneurial pursuits, journey of starting Scapic, his productivity hacks, and of course, about the Flipkart partnership. Hope you enjoyed this episode as much as we did, and it's time to listen and learn. So, hi Sai, welcome to the Nails and Hammers podcast.
Hey, how's it
Yeah,
going, Kaushal? Thank you so much for having me.
yeah. So I wanted to start from the very beginning. Can you share a bit with us about where did you grow up and where all did you study?
My word, we're really going for a throwback now, aren't we?
Yep.
Yeah.
Like my journey is, in a summary, I'm sort of a journey of an accidental entrepreneur. I was born and brought up deep down south, all the way by the beaches in Chennai. Took much liking to the whole concept of ensuring that you put your head down, you're able to work through. It was a very conservative Tambram family that I had sort of most of my outlook built towards. I then from there moved to Bangalore with my family during my high school. So I sort of was half Chennai, uprooted to Bangalore. Spent most of my time in Bangalore since then. Had a small stint in the Bay Area for a bit in business school. But for all purposes, I'm sort of between my Tair Sadam and my Masala Dosa and sort of a little bit of an identity intersection there.
So where did you go to college and what did you study? Or was that?
Right. Uh, Much like everybody else, during my 11th and 12th, I sort of had a mandate on which is it doesn't matter what degree of engineering that you take, it's totally fine. But you're being an engineer, and we also had our dreaded entrance examinations back in the day that we had to take part in. Uh, I think what did end up happening was there was a considerable amount of expectations. I'm sure every kid has probably gone through this. I was no different. So I ended up taking all of my entrance exams and then eventually going through to a college called RV College of Engineering here in Bangalore. Now, RV is an interesting place for the kind of cohort it provides you with. Reasonably ambitious people around you who sort of also are deeply rooted into a few core beliefs of ensuring that you're sort of academically oriented, etc. So I think college played a huge role in terms of how I shaped out, especially with my peer group that probably helped me be a little more risk friendly as compared to what most of the institutions might have allowed.
So, when did you realize that you wanted to be an entrepreneur? And like, were your parents supportive of that?
Right. Interestingly, I thought through college, 4 years of engineering, it took me like 1.5 years to realize that the rest is not going to be much if I don't really make of it.
Mhm.
Uh, Time tends to fly, you tend to coast, and goals tend to be fairly amorphous, right? You're surviving from one semester to another, and I quickly realized my life was between the canteen, the classroom, as well as multiple innovative ways to bunk whatever is going on in the classroom. And it was during mine, I then decided to sign up for a small summer internship at the end of my first year. This was at Intel. Now, during my time at Intel, I was exuberant. This kid with shiny new shoes borrowed from his dad, thinking he's going to change the world because he's going to contribute to new chips. None of that happened. Right.
Hmm.
I quickly realized the only way you're going to possibly have value is if you're going to do something that's contrarian, and if you're going to be right. If you're going to be wrong, everyone's going to tell you they told you so. If you're going to do something that's consensus, you're a part of the herd, right? So the absolute only way in order to exit the university with some sort of impact was pretty obvious there. You just got to take a non-linear gamble, and hopefully you're at the right end of it by the time you finish. And that's really where entrepreneurship started through for me. Purely because I noticed a small opportunity in the education space, which I decided to take a stab at. And that was fairly out of the blue as compared to what a typical college graduate would possibly be going through. And that's really the first sparks of entrepreneurship for me.
So what were your first steps? So you had a few things you started before Scapic. Can you tell us about them and how did, what all were they about?
Sure thing. Um, I think this journey started through from as early as say about 2012, 2013. And the first thing that I was possibly up and running with was an idea in the education space. This was back when the Akash tablet was a fairly big deal in the country, a $35 tablet PC that was supposedly going to revolutionize the education system here in India. Now, we didn't get to see that, but what we did get to see was tablets seemed a fairly useful instrument as a part of the classroom. And now the Akash was one attempt at it, but the iPads are fairly successful in USA, and a bunch of other tablets are fairly successful across the Indian classroom setup. Either top down because the parents wanted you to buy one, or even more top down, which is the institute wanted you to purchase one. Now, the one thing that we noticed was everybody was so hell bent on selling you the hardware that nobody really had a view on what the software stack should be. So we got up and running, building something called a LMS, or a learning management system, a white labeled learning management system, where if you are an institute, a college, or a test prep center, you would be able to drop your content in, and you quickly have a tablet and a software suite and an MDM, which is sort of all purpose built for the kind of use case that you have. It was called Arium back in the day, and my first stab at entrepreneurship was with Arium. We were exceptionally naive. We just decided to build it because we saw an opportunity there, and interestingly scaled to a few thousand kids before we sort of decided to ensure that the technology is better with someone else's hands, and we sort of had a structured a small team for that.
Before starting Scaping, why do you think that the previous ideas did not work out?
Right. It didn't stop with Arium. There probably was another stint called Supertext, which I was a part of as well. Supertext was at the founding team in the early days. The belief was you would want to have a hyperlocal delivery system, which is an aggregator of aggregators for what it is. You text for any of your requests. You then have a delivery fleet, or we connect you to the right folks. And similarly, you're able to get all of your requests sorted through. Now, so we didn't go too far with that idea either. And I think I can broadly credit it to the same things that I credit a successful startup to: team, tech, and traction, right? In that order, actually. The first thing that you really need to nail down is a team that has got your back, and a team that is that you cannot possibly find if it wasn't for the perfect storm that originated around this startup in itself.
Okay.
And I think that the first time I saw that happening was with Kpik. The tech, of course, is the backbone around which your entire thesis is built on. So you hope that you get the tech right. For example, our thesis was back in, say, something like Supertext, that chatbots are inherently important to the way customer service moves forward at. And Facebook was an important player in that whole concept of chatbots. Now that whole thesis didn't pan out. Like Facebook didn't necessarily see it through. Chatbots are not useful. I'm sure you rather prefer picking up the phone and scolding a human being as compared to scolding an AI.
Right.
We still do some things the way we do. So if the thesis around the tech does not pan out, you're sort of hard done, and that can be internal or external, which is what you're building can possibly just not have a good fit, or more importantly, the external factors around which it is centered on what you want to build might not have a good fit. The last part is the traction side. I think what happens is, especially in college or right after college, as we engineering grads end up building a bunch of startups at, we come at it from a very engineering mindset, which is what can be done because of technology as compared to if I do it, does someone care? Now,
Okay.
changing the orientation to if I do it, does someone care, which is building the audience first, or building a certain market around which the product can be shaped up from, is a lot tougher. uh, we are so focused on, can I launch an MVP, can I launch this feature, we launch it, and then we realize not too many people are coming to it, so we think one more feature will solve this problem for me, or a whole new release will solve this problem for me. And we've done this multiple times, to a point where it's the battle scars that I'm sort of speaking from. So instead, this time around, what if we were able to think it through from build the audience for a large market, have the technology piece that is in order, and to ensure that even if you go through difficult times, your team has got your back. How do you sort of build a team structured around that? And if you're able to look at this early on, very deliberately, I think the chances of your startup making it through gets significantly higher.
Okay. So we're going to talk about Scapic a lot more, but before we begin, could you just tell us in layman terms, like for people who don't know a lot of tech like me, I mean, Kushal and you are from the tech backgrounds. So what exactly do you do with Scapic?
Right. So what exactly I do at Scapic is a lot tougher an answer than what does Scapic do.
Yeah,
Uh,
what does Scapic do, like the larger picture?
Gotcha. What does Kpik do is we operate in the world of virtual reality and augmented reality as a no-code platform or an editor. Very simply put, we think the way content will evolve from now gets a lot more immersive. Like, for example, a TikTok video is basically your whole screen, which is completely captured by one video feed for all practical purposes. And we think this trend's just going to evolve out. Everything about your time in an average day is about your smartphone, and everything about your smartphone is about the camera, right? You capture a picture, a video, you throw it out on social media. The camera has become possibly the most contested area of both innovation as well as customer centricity. Now, the only way you differentiate, either as a smartphone seller or more importantly as an application, if you have anything to do with the camera, is all these effects that you add on top of the camera, or anything that you're able to differentiate your camera offering with. And very quickly you realize augmented reality, 3D, these are technologies that are inevitable for me to sort of push out or have in my arsenal. But then things get tough, right? What do I do with AR? What do I do with VR? What do I do with 3D? We keep talking about these fancier buzzwords, but the moment it comes to making a consumer application or a consumer use case around it, things get very tricky. So we built almost like what a WordPress would be in the world of VR AR, a bunch of ready to use off the shelf components that you'd be able to put together in order to build your own VR or your AR experiences and put it out there to your customers.
So, I mean, sitting in Bangalore when you're surrounded by a lot of e-commerce startups, I mean, no one really thinks about, AR, VR or deep tech. So, how did you come across the idea about Scapic, and also how did you meet your co-founder, Ajay?
And that's an interesting one. I think the idea behind Kpik solidified the moment you start thinking in systems as compared to in just is this a good idea or not. So the principles around which we started thinking about Scapic was what we continue to call as the arc of computing. Now, the arc of computing is basically a way of saying that the way we've interacted with computers has changed. We've sort of gone through mainframes to desktops, desktops to laptops, laptops to smartphones. And it's not going to stop at smartphones, right? There's inevitably going to be a form factor that competes, challenges, or eventually complements or takes over what a smartphone is. Now, how long is that eventuality? We're not sure. But when we look back, we've seen that within every 10 to 12 years, this has consistently happened, right?
Yeah.
2007, the first iPhone gets out. Rewind 12 years from there, it was the first laptop. Rewind another 12, it was the Macintosh. Rewind another 12, you're at the mainframe. Rewind, you're at punch cards. I can go on and on. But the moment you look at that, you start looking at a consistent time window around which technology enables you to take major platform level shifts. And now, when you look around you, what's the next platform then? Right? Are we all going to have carry slabs of glass in our pocket, which is 6 inches to 7 inches, and that's it? No. We have always looked at abstracting information, making it easier to access, and most importantly, making it easier to put in front of your face, right? Like the smartphone is for all practical purposes, a computing device that's got a screen that just throws info in front of your face when you need it. Now, eventually, we think wearable computing can get good enough to a point with existing technology that we can start taking that information and throwing it out around you. And the glasses become a great form factor to do that. The other side is the wrist, but in a slightly more limited way, where you would be able to have wearable computers that sort of do that part, fitness focused, notifications focused. But if you look at more general purpose information access mediums, like what a smartphone is, the glass has become a very compelling medium to do that. Now, that's the belief that we started with. Now, we were fairly bullish on the fact that it's going to happen, but how fast, how soon, and how efficiently can we make that transition? Is it as going to be as profound as the iPhone, or is it going to be more of a subtle bang like what a laptop was? Like those were remaining to be seen, and that's really the thesis building part. Now I've got a thesis. I'm a strong believer, but that doesn't matter, right? I need a team which believes in it strongly, and most importantly, a co-founder who believes in it strongly. I was really fortunate to have a founding team because they did most of the hard work. My founding team included my co-founder in Ajay. Quick context: Ajay is someone with over a decade's worth of experience in these ancillary fields, and was someone who was spending his time in the Bay Area in working in a VR startup called Grid Raster. Some of the work that they do were the absolute bee's knees in terms of just balancing load compute between the edge, which is a new concept in computing in itself, and how a VR device could possibly do split a lot of the processing between here and there. It's almost like what you would see with applications like Google's Stadia, where all the gaming computation happens on the cloud and you simply get a video feed, so on and so forth. But take the
Right.
same concept and apply it to VR, AR, etc. So I was absolutely blown away by the fact that here's a team, a small one sitting in the Bay Area, sort of cranking work that is astounding. So I started having a conversation with Ajay during my time there, and we sort of slowly built out a lot of passion around the space. More importantly, right? The meetings are never transactional. I truly believe that the best co-founder meetings go through a severely large dating phase, right? And only after that do you sort of build both the cadence and the comfort to make that transition. So Ajay and I spoke about it for over 8 months in order to build that to life. Mostly around TechCrunch articles of around the space, right? You might think these are like deep discussions and all that. None of that. We just had a feel for each other in terms of the way we work, the way we think, and the way we can complement each other's skills. Now, to cap off the founding team, I also had Akash from a design-ish background who was able to jump right in with us. Now, for Ajay being the one with experience and the engineering side of the fence, with me sort of being a one-trick pony in terms of just early stage company building, Akash really balanced it out with respect to how do you think of design not as an afterthought, but something that's deeply core for what your customers want because it's a very important part of the value proposition. And that's really where we picked it up between the three of us as a founding team. Ajay jumped in as co-founder. Akash wanted to be hands-on and ensured that the product is sort of built out. And we started assembling a small team together. We were very fortunate to find designers and developers who sort of really had, more than anything, the curiosity and the hustle to learn. Right? Because with AR, VR, what ends up happening is you're not going to put out a JD out there saying, I need 5 years of experience, 2 years of experience, or even a month of
Right.
experience in this space, because you simply won't get it. So we had to invest in everybody we invested, almost an investment. We never called it a hire, right? You're practically pulling a trigger and hoping this pays off for you because you're going to put more effort into them over the first few months before you start seeing the reaps and the rewards from it. So we started doing that. And that paid out. From the design side, we were very fortunate to have the likes of Atul, Harshit, just a bunch of others who really ensured that they were able to jump in and stick it through because of how wild and bumpy some of these rides can get, while staying committed to the original goal that if you do this right, you're really going to be out there trying to make some impact at. So that's how the thesis and the team sort of built itself together.
Yeah. So when you guys started out, you were basically a virtual reality editor for users who could like just do drag and drop and create virtual reality experiences. And now you've sort of pivoted to more like augmented reality for e-commerce. So how did that happen? How did you get the right product for the market?
Or the part where I told you we take a very engineering mindset in terms of building a product and then figuring the customer bit as hard, right? Uh, the easy one-line experience was we realized where our market is, but the longer meandering one was we continue to remain very deeply passionate and invested in VR, but we realized for VR to really take off, it's a chicken and egg problem, right? I need the devices to have a great experience, but I'm not going to buy a device at 50,000, 60,000, 90,000 if you convert it to Indian rupees. Like, if there is not a very compelling reason for me to buy so, right? Your
Yeah.
smartphone today is not that way, right? Like, uh, it's more to do with the WhatsApp, the Instagrams, and the PUBGs as compared to the smartphone in itself. The ecosystem drives the purchase way more than the actual hardware at this point of time. Now, with VR, there is no ecosystem just yet. There is no one singular, exceptionally important reason why you should purchase it yet. And this is rewinding about a year and a half when this decision was made. Now, we think things have moved a little, but can be better. Now, with augmented reality, though, the good part was hardware never became a limitation at that point, which is you had a Trojan horse sitting in someone's pocket where they can pull out their phones and actually have a decent to more than acceptable experience of what you're trying to achieve with AR. The second part was AR was more contextually relevant, which is we thought over a period of time, if you're developing a B2B use case, the chances of someone doing it in their smartphones is exponentially higher than someone slipping onto a headset and possibly going through the use case. Even if it's e-commerce for a second, I can assure you nobody just yet is so excited to buy their new t-shirt that they put on a VR headset to make that purchase happen. But if that t-shirt is available for you to drape over another person or bring to life in augmented reality through an Instagram or any other application that's out there, you suddenly have a use case that clicks, right? And so we realized that for the markets we were after and the type of a SaaS business that we were building, AR made more sense in the immediate short term in order to build out a more impactful and sustainable business around as well. So that's really where most of our decision making came from. The audience was larger, the market was larger, and hence the timing seemed to be better as AR first and allow VR to evolve and mature out while the big companies like a Facebook continue to devote a lot of resources to it so that we can build something meaningful in it when the time is right.
So when you talk to corporates, I mean, they would be surprised, like when a young team from Bangalore like says that, hey, we're building a SaaS AR/VR platform. So who are your early adopters, and how did you convince them to use Kpik?
What you say as surprised, I would call as skeptical, purely because that's really where the sales process starts off at. I think it's on two counts. The first one is this team the right one to do this job? And more, the second one, more importantly, is do I need to spend this money on a completely new use case that seems like a science experiment, right? Now, anything to do with any other space usually has an annual budget in these larger organizations. There is a generously fanciful Excel sheet that's going to have an allocation towards the ads money that you spend, the TV time that you spend, or the celebrity that you rope in, etc. If you go to that expenditure and you ask them where's the AR/VR row, the honest answer is the AR/VR row does not exist, right? So we have to do three things. The first thing is we have to tell them this is an important avenue for you to engage and tap into your users with. The second bit was we had to show a straight line between the experience and the ROI, right? Which is what do you gain if you even do this? And the last part is we had to do all of this while ensuring that they pay us for our product, right? Because everybody wants a free POC, an easy way to get started. They think they're doing you a favor, which is if you're building a business, no, there are no favors between two customers. Um, Doing these was a tough task. The way I think we got about it was a fairly a fairly interesting product strategy that's new these days called product led growth. Now, what PLG means is build a product that has several hooks inside it that help one of your customers spread the word to a few more, right? Word of mouth for all practical purposes, but in a more scientific manner. You would build reward, incentive, onboarding, as well as market mechanisms that foster that sort of conversation around it. A great example of this would be something like Superhuman, which is an email client that people cannot stop talking about. It's an email client at the end of the day, right? Which is, it should be easy to replace, right? You log on to Gmail and the interface of Gmail is different. It's nice, but is it $300 million market capitalization and a devoted audience nice? That's a question. Now that's a question they answer with good product led growth. They bring it to life. Now, how did we do it? Is similar or taking a lot of notes and playbooks from companies that were successful this way. Try to build a model where customers start talking, referring, as well as evangelizing the product for us. Early customers in the day, including the likes of Airbus, a bunch of IPL teams, Celio, which is a fashion brand, they were instrumental in our success in terms of just not just anchoring us to as a SaaS client that made a lot of sense for us, but also from the standpoint of getting the word out there to customers around them. That really got, I wouldn't say a buzz, but at least a generous amount of curiosity around what were these guys doing and how can they be of value to my company.
Okay, so being a founder, first of all, what does culture at a startup mean to you, and like, how do you incorporate it in your startup? And how do you keep your team motivated because they're working in a field that there's not much work already done? There's sort of a new field. So how do you lead them?
So I think culture and then more importantly the nature of work. So let's address the culture part first. I think in my way, in my definition, culture is everything that they would talk about you or the work that you do when you're not in the room or with their friends, right? The moment the conversation goes to an informal setting and it is a true reflection of what their work means to them, and that's really where culture stems out of. uh,
Okay.
Now that's from the team's perspective. From the founding perspective, culture is everything that you can do in order to set your team to be successful across every professional walk of life that you can. Are you helping them grow? And in turn, are they helping the organization grow? because at the end of the day, it's the most important goal that we're all chasing. Now, to bring this culture to life, there are multiple avenues to take or multiple paths to take. A path that we deliberately chose to take was work hard, put your head down, and always be aware that you're in part of a very small subset of people who know this space and take pride in the fact that you're one amongst very few who are able to contribute meaningfully to an evolving space per se. Now, we realized very early on that we really need to put in the number of hours in order to make this happen, because we're not just building, but we are learning, experimenting, failing, and building. Right? More often than not, it's like the Wild West. Anything that we do has to be tested first. Can it work in AR, VR? Does it make sense? Does the code really fly? When it does, only then it goes into productization, and then later a customer paying for it. Everything was almost 4x difficult in this sort of a space. To do that, the simple arithmetic meant that you're not signing up to a 9 to 5. We were fairly candid about it, but at the same time, you can be candid or not. The team needs to believe in the vision. So the larger purpose, why are we doing this? Why do we choose to have really bad Friday evenings in terms of just an abusive amount of work while the rest of your peers might be not doing that? I think those were questions that we wanted to answer, but you can't do that as a Q&A or an FAQ, right? You do that only by showing them that this is the very reason we deserve to exist as an independent organization, and this is the work that we're doing, and that's where we move it forward at. So I thought between my years, or between my 20 to 25, this is the most meaningful amount of work that I can ever do and impact the world with. And I was just, and my only attempt was to help the peers around me as well as my teammates see that this could possibly be the most important work that they ever end up doing between their 20 and 30. And once you have that sense of purpose, I think the rest of the culture sort of falls together with respect to people aggregating around the same set of values.
You earlier mentioned that like finding a co-founder is like a long dating process, but then even the best couple fight and have disagreements. So what happens like when you and Ajay have disagreements? How do you come to a decision then?
There is nothing that a good plate of biryani cannot move, I guess. I think I at least found that out quite early about Ajay. But jokes aside, I think if you're doing something and you're passionate about it, there is bound to be some imbalance, right? And not imbalance in a bad way, right? Like, for example, if you're very passionate about playing football, you're going to probably prioritize that over doing anything else in an average day. If you're passionate about building a company, you're going to do that for 18 hours a day, no matter what, right? The very concept of passion draws you away from balance. Now, if two passionate people disagree on something, that's the best recipe to ensure that you're going to have some aggression as in that room. Now, how do you very quickly realize that the hearts are not coming at it as you versus me, right? The most of the co-founder conversations that end up being disputes very quickly come into a defensive aggressive stance or an aggressive stance where two people face off against each other, two ideas face off against each other. I quickly realized that's not the thing, right? That here are two people who want to make a company successful, who want to make an idea successful. Two people, three people, whatever the quorum is. Everybody is on the same side of the table, not different sides, right? Everyone's collectively desperate to get this to good shores. And now the moment you realize that, the gloves are off, but not in a bad way again, right? The gloves are off because you don't need to sucker punch the other person. You really need to understand where are they coming from, what's causing a very passionate disagreement in the first place, and is there something that you can truly do about it that is not egregious in nature, right? That is not antagonizing them, the team, the goal, the mission. And as soon as you elevate yourself beyond this petty, I'm fighting with you, or my ideas are better than yours, as compared to, is this going to benefit the organization? Here's my math. Is this going to benefit the organization? Here's mine. I think it's a fairly easier way to end a dispute without it growing into a dispute itself, as compared to a much more of a civil conversation, which is where every one of our conversations have possibly gone through.
Yeah, so you raised $500,000 in your first seed round, right? So could you tell us more about that process, and did you face any rejections, and how did you deal with them?
I think more often than not, if you're at the deep tech side, you only count your you only count the number of times people say yes. You just learn to let go of the rejections because you face that almost all the time, all the time.
Yeah.
Uh, we would have probably gone through to almost 3 digits in terms of the number of funds, angels, and people that we were having a conversation with through the life cycle of Kpik itself. The one thing you constantly hear is, I'm not familiar with the space. Because I'm not familiar with the space, no matter how good your idea is, I can't build the comfort to pull the trigger on it. Right? The lack of familiarity breeds skepticism. Skepticism breeds uncertainty. Uncertainty breeds a no. The decision making was fairly simple from the VC standpoint. We realized the only way someone's going to nod their head and say yes is if someone's going to have a little bit more of a thesis around deep tech already built out. For example, if I were to convince you that jumping out of jumping out of a paragliding lesson is a great idea to do, somewhere along the line you need to believe that paragliding as a concept is okay. Right now, very similar is here. You needed some fun to believe that deep tech is a good bet, and hence Kpik is a good bet because they're actually doing meaningfully okay work in the deep tech side. We found a specific fund by the name of Speciale Invest. That was a deep tech focused fund per se. And now that really sort of changed it out for us, purely because here's a fund who's built their operational thesis around the fact that deep tech is a good bet to take as compared to too early, too soon, too tough. Uh, the thinking was what if it worked as compared to what if it didn't work, and that sort of paid off for us, and that was useful. I think deep tech has come a long way since we started fundraising. Things like space technology, as well as a few other domains back in the Bay Area as well. Crypto for what it was, but more importantly, where the blockchain lies, where the intersection between AI as well as autonomous driving are. You've started to see a lot more plucky upstarts, especially in the Bay Area, in the deep tech side, starting to be exceptionally successful. Still yet to happen in India, but way better a scenario as compared to where and when we were fundraising at this point of time.
Yep, definitely. And just wrapping the whole conversation around Scapic, how did the whole conversation with Flipkart start? I mean, why did you choose Flipkart? And anything else that you can share about the deal?
Gotcha. Uh, I'm not sure of where my boundaries are with respect to keeping my mouth tight, but given I can sort of share a few interesting stories if they count. My conversations with FK started when there was an internal idea champion, if I were to say so, more than anything else, someone who truly deeply believed in the fact that AR was a hygiene level feature and not just good to have as such. Now, he goes by the name of Sriram Iyer. Now, Sriram was someone who, from the early days, thumped the table and said, you guys are doing good work, but at the end of the day, the work's only as useful as the number of people it impacts. And would you want to sit and try to build Scapic one customer after the other? Or would you want to possibly reach out to 150 odd million Indians who are using an application on a monthly basis? Now that's a no-brainer, right? If impact is what you're truly chasing, there is at no point of realistic time frame that would you be able to scale a B2B application to that sort of impact resonance as quickly as what firing from the shoulders of an e-commerce giant and the most important e-commerce in India brings to the table. The second part that made it really simple for us was, even though we could have had multiple paths that we took as a company, the level of integrity and passion towards technology that Flipkart brought to the table was humbling. Right, we truly thought here's an environment where both the team and the company can end up learning a lot more as compared to existing in isolation per se. And we also thought right now, one of the most sticky use cases that is in the world of AR, after the time you threw a Pokeball to catch Pikachu, was now in terms of e-commerce. Right? It started to be baked into ads, search results, social media. And we very quickly realized that buying something or marketing something is a great way to tap into AR's potential for that short burst of immersion and zapping out of. And nobody's done that at the scale at which we are attempting to do at Flipkart right now. And those three decisions put together really made it simple for us to ensure that we were able to put all our eggs in that basket and focus our energy in terms of making it happen with Flipkart. And can't be happier about the kind of team that we've been in conversations with right now to carry that journey forward.
Okay, so we're going to moving to the next section now, which where we'll talk more about you as a person. So, how do you usually unwind when you're not working? What do you do?
That's an interesting one. I think I voraciously read, but except for the cliches aside, I mostly spend my time just trying to distill and journal as much. So I sort of have a small routine that I tend to follow. which sort of fluctuates between reading things that are passionate for me, as well as going through a process of deliberately journaling and trying to understand how your week, month/year has been. So sort of doing retros and reflecting upon your own journey, I thought was deeply empowering. So that was something that I tend to do. Besides both of these, an outrageously big addict for cricket. So you would most likely be finding me tuning into very shady YouTube videos, which are from 12 years ago of Wasim Akram Yorker.
Yeah.
What does founder mentality mean for you?
Having the willingness to take 12 punches to the face and then getting up and saying the 13th one is probably where I'm going to make it count.
Yeah, that's a good answer. How do you, maybe learn and unlearn things from time to time as you grow?
A very candid amount of staying humble, which is be in a room where you are never allowed to feel like you're one of the smartest or the smartest, and that automatically takes care of the rest. So it's your job to put yourself in that kind of a room, either through your own team or through your peers. But if you can exist in an intellectual or a challenging enough quorum of people, and that quorum has more to teach you and than you have to teach them, that ends up taking or solving for the learning and the unlearning part, because very quickly you're willing to accept the opinions of someone else because it's coming from an area of merit as compared to an area where you think that it's of merit.
During your journey, you might have made a lot of mistakes. So, what's one thing that you would not repeat again?
The one thing which I would not go about repeating at all would be a small framework that I learned from Uber called heart, head, and hands, which is every company at the end of the day is a good combination of the heart, which is passion, the head, which is strategy, and hands, which is pure execution. Now, in between any of these, if one tends to overshadow the other, the whole company tends to go for a toss. So what is your balance? Like you can be a more hands-on company as compared to everything else, or you can be a company purely built on passion as compared to anything else, or you just strategize, and just get through with it because this is really good at that. There is no right answer, but what is your formula is something that's very important for you to figure out early on, because that then dictates the number of product managers you need, the amount of validation you have to do in the market, how quickly can you get that product out versus how deliberately do you want to think of a launch and ensure that success is sort of meeting itself that way. The framework sets the stage for how company building happens, because all the time you're so busy building the company, you don't focus on is this the right way to build as compared to am I building. And this sort of framework helped me understand that the am I building part is just as important or just as useful. So I'd take that to anything that I do next.
So, who are your biggest role models?
Man, I do not think it stops with one. I think at any point of time, I try to I try to learn, which is I try to approach a conversation from an area of absolute zero knowledge, which is also true, but hopefully I put up a braver face than that. But given that you do that, you leave a conversation with something or the other that you can. But if I were to again drop names and pick up the usual, such as uh, Patrick from Stripe, Paul Graham, these are very important people in terms of the way they shaped technology. And I'm only in awe of people who get to build monumental companies and also have the time to share their learnings and their lessons out with the rest of the world, so that a lot of what they have done are things that you can possibly assimilate and learn forward from. So I read a lot only because I want to stay true to that learning concept. And who do I single out? I can't single out, but what I can say is, as much as you can, go back to the reading part, because I think that helps non-linearly for anybody to do anything that they want in life.
Yeah. Okay.
Also mentioned that you work with IPL teams in the past. So, like you work with RCB and with the Asia Cup as well. So, how was that experience like being a cricket nut?
Oh my word. I think half the time the rest of the team blames me on the fact that we took that deal only because we were cricket nerds more than anything else. It was fun, right? I think it was great on one side because it's a sport you so deeply love, and the other side is about you learn to appreciate the event, which is the IPL in this case, for everything outside the cricket as well. It's such a complex, multi-geared moving model that your jaws almost drop in terms of the number of people, families, and companies that tend to ride on that 12-week window in order to really make it count. So
Yeah.
the behind the curtains genuinely seemed after that point of time tougher than what ends up happening in across 22 yards. And that's when that really taught us much in terms of the putting a match together is just as important, if not even more important than what ends up happening on field. And this sort of gave us a very cool experience of that.
Okay. So you're still very young, but what do you think is the purpose of your life?
Truly wish more people told me I'm younger. These days, I don't get to play the age card as much. Um, with respect to purpose in life, I sort of come at it from a slightly less travel the world, find your ikigai, uh, more less preachy side of the fence. I think the way I see it is you have a limited number of times that you get to swing your bat and strike a home run. The home run can be in anything that you want. I choose to make my home run around the work that I do. You can choose to make yours completely different. But if a home run is what you're going for, how do you ensure that you're setting yourself up to take not just one swing at it, but a few swings at it? Because statistically, one swing is just not enough.
Yeah.
Now, my purpose in life is to possibly take that swing and have a home run where you're able to impact not just people around you, but entire systems, or if not the entire way that an industry works around you. Uh, and I think the only way you put a dent in the universe is if you care, and then you make sure that the world cares about what you care. Whatever you care about can be different. It can be something as nerdy as what we do here. It can be something a lot less nerdy in terms of just motivating people to go do the right thing. But if you find a way in order to unlock the same amount of passion that you bring to that subject matter with the rest of the world, I think that for me is life's purpose per se. And I choose to keep that around the world of technology, startups, the things I'm passionate about, which is putting your head down and building things. But I truly believe that it can be anything for anyone at the end of the day.
And like, what advice would you have for someone who's starting up today?
Do a lot of work before you get the idea started, right? Like, especially in our age group or age cohort of people who got up and running, the idea of wanting to be a startup guy is a lot more approachable as compared to the hard work of building a startup itself. Everybody has seen the Instagrammy side of this, which is the events, the transactions. You sort of connect the dots only from the superficial phase that you think, okay, it's a bed of roses. It is outrageously difficult to just have sustenance, endurance, and stamina to stick it through. And how do you do that? Is by signing up for the process as compared to signing up for what the end goal was, right? And how do you truly appreciate the process? Is if you're able to appreciate the parts around things will get hard. So let me do a lot more work right now and be very aware of the fact that if this company works out, I'm going to do it for 4 to 7 years of my adult life, right?
Yeah.
And if you're okay with that, then go to the next step, which is this idea something that I see myself doing for 7 years of my adult life? And if that is okay, go to the next step, which is there a number of people who would be willing to pay me an unreasonable amount in order to make this company successful as an outcome? And only if these three pieces fall together do you start building. But once you start building, don't go back to the drawing board and second guess yourself saying, is this the right idea? Right? Do your homework, but commit to what you're up to if the homework adds up.
Yeah. So Scaping has been a great journey for you so far. What's your vision for the future with the company and with yourself?
I think this is for the first time that we have an opportunity to possibly impact millions, hundreds of millions, if not billions of Indians, or in fact, a
Yeah.
global scale in terms of where commerce is moving.
Yeah.
And the good part is the technology and time from an AR perspective are also starting to fall together. Smartphones are getting better than ever, cameras are getting better than ever, and there are newer technologies like a whole LiDAR sensor, which is what NASA used to put someone on the moon 40 years ago, that's now shrunk down and dropped into your new iPhones. So we've really come a long distance at this point of time. Now, how do you take that, marry it to e-commerce, and put it out there? So we think with Kpik, it's a very exciting time as Flipkart readies up for its next big thing. We think the camera becomes a very important way to transact or do commerce, because every time you've bought a product in e-commerce, you've bought it through a feed, right? You've gone through 9 cards stacked horizontally, then clicked on one, gone to a PDP, then hit add to cart. We think this is for the first time your buying journey is possibly going to start from the camera. right? Where you're inspired looking at something, you want to snap a picture looking at something, you want to drop something like a sofa in front of you and then possibly make that transaction happen. You get the chance to possibly make camera the next frontier for commerce itself. And that is sort of our most exciting phase, which we think we're going to be having a lot of fun building out over the next few years.
So we're at the last section of our podcast, and it's a rapid fire round. So I mean, just say the first thing that comes to mind when you hear the question. All right. So MS Dhoni or Virat Kohli?
MS Dhoni.
Okay, dosa or idli?
A good crispy masala dosa any day.
Okay.
Bangalore or Chennai?
To put me in a spot. Chennai.
Okay. Facebook or Snapchat?
Facebook for the execution, Snapchat for the audacity.
Your top 3 favorite apps?
My word. How do I even boil it down to 3? I think I would put it, the first one as WhatsApp, for how profoundly it changed communications around us. We tend to underappreciate it. The second possibly would be Feedly, which is an RSS news aggregator. RSS is still a very deeply full concept, but people have just forgotten how useful it is. The third is Pocket, which is a source that you would use in order to read, save, as well as access articles that you are passionate about, highlight, and store your own visual archive of them. And the last is Notion, which is a slightly new add to the list, which I would think is probably the biggest unlock of value in terms of setting up systems that work for you in the sort of one single destination that tends to do it well.
So what would you do if you had unlimited resources in terms of time and capital?
Not to sound cliche, but I don't think I would do much different, which is I still think building something is the biggest way you can impact society. Now, unlimited time and capital just helps me build more, build faster, and build bigger. But the building part simply cannot be abstracted through from my own identity. So I think I'll end up doing the same things, but pouring a lot more of the time and money that I have access to just doing it.
Yeah.
And lastly, any interesting hobby you picked up during COVID?
The first part was I started existing completely independently, which was a bit of a thing for me. Coming from a family where I possibly had creature comforts all through my living, I've realized how difficult even the most mundane tasks are. So the next time that the maid walked in home, I started developing a special degree of appreciation for how grueling some of these tasks can be as compared to what I am. So I think the very concept of self-reliance really took a very new definition and meaning for me that time. Outside that, just a couple of other hobbies in terms of looking at writing or putting things out there and building in the open, as we call it, as something that I've tried to take seriously, but that's still more work in progress right now.
All right, so that's it from the podcast side. Thank you so much for your time, and I hope that you enjoyed it as much as we did.
I couldn't have found a better format, gentlemen. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.